Morning, everyone. Sorry to be a little late here this morning. Uh, I seem to push myself every day. uh, but anyway, we're going to do a good lesson today, which by synchronicity is exactly what I need, at least. And it is called A Lesson in Peacemaking, The Mystery of Self-Sacrifice in the Red Book by Günter Langwieler. And I will begin that discussion here momentarily. Why is this? Okay, let me expand that a little bit so I can see it. Good morning, Liberat. Nice to see you today. All right. Now, I wanted to read something about Mr. Langwieler's background, so I will do it now. I'm reading today from the Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions, edited by Mary Stein and Thomas Arst. And this is volume 2 of the 5-volume series. Mr. Langwieler is Doctor of Medicine, diploma in psychology, is a graduate of the C.G. Jung Institute of Berlin, Germany, 1994, of the Free University of Berlin Human Medicine, 1983, and the Technical University of Berlin Psychology, 1976. He is a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst and has a private practice in Berlin. He is lecturing at the C.G. Jung Institute of Berlin and Zurich, internationally at several congresses of the IAAP, and published articles about the Zarathustra seminar of C.G. Jung, about the Red Book, about Jung's work in the 1930s, and about active imagination. He is the president of the C.G. Jung Society of Berlin. I won't go further than that. Okay. Nice to see you. Good morning, Art. Nice to see you this morning. Uh, let's see. I need to readjust my screen a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm running a little late today. Um, but as I say, by synchronicity, um, this particular article is exactly what I need to hear today because I'm having an issue with a colleague, and a number of us are. And so I'm working today. And one of the reasons I was late is I was speaking with my wife about the approach that I should take with this colleague. And I guess I'm going to have to write an email. And that's always treacherous territory to write an email because then you're stuck with it for forever and always. And so anyway, enough about that for now. And Michelle, good morning. Nice to see you. Um, and so here's the essay that I'm reading today, which is A Lesson in Peacemaking, The Mystery of Self-Sacrifice in the Red Book by Günter Langwieler. He opens it with a Jung quote. They will all become terribly enraptured by these tremendous experiences, and in their blindness will want to understand them as outer events. It is an inner happening. That is the way of the perfection of the mystery of Christ, so that people learn self-sacrifice. May the frightfulness become so great that it can turn man's eyes inward. C.G. Jung. Okay, well, that would be good. In my own situation, that'd be terrific. Okay, introversion and history. Let's see, my eyes a little higher on the screen. Okay. Um, and Michelle says she has the book and can help me read. Well, that would be wonderful when you're available. Okay, introversion and history. C.G. Jung's Red Book is fundamentally the personal and collective confession of a witness of his time, begun on the eve of World War I, the first of the big catastrophes of the 20th century. What happened to Jung personally in his visions, dreams, and active imaginations from November 1913 to June 1914, forming the first layer of his Red Book, was not only of significance for his individual crisis after separating from Freud. Let me read that again. Ah, hello. Nice, nice image you have there. Hi, Michelle.
Hey.
Nice to see you.
Yes, good to be here. Um,
Okay, I didn't have the right emphasis. Do you want to read?
sure.
If you,
Do you mind if I start from the beginning?
I don't.
Okay.
Just leave out the CG unquote. We've done that, but
Okay.
introversion in history. I'm in the middle of that paragraph, and I sort of misread a sentence. So if you would reread it, would be better.
Sure. Introversion and History. C.G. Jung's Red Book is fundamentally the personal and collective confession of a witness of his time, begun on the eve of World War I, the first of the big catastrophes of the 20th century. What happened to Jung personally in his visions, dreams, and active imaginations from November 1913 to June 1914, forming the first layer of his Red Book, was not only of significance for his individual crisis after separating from Freud, when World War I broke out on August 1st, 1914. He noticed that his earlier visions of a flood over Northern Europe had a collective meaning. This gave a political sense to the appearance of symbols of destructiveness that he had at first interpreted personally as breeding a psychosis. From the perspective of August 1st, 1914, it must have seemed to him that he had served as an individual medium for collective transformations. Inside his psyche, significant transformations of collective symbols had taken place. Corresponding historical events followed. His visions, dreams, and active imaginations happened to him. He didn't produce them by conscious will or conscious decision. Jung became, in his suffering, an involuntary witness of unconscious destructive forces. By identifying himself with the mystery of the self sacrifice of Christ, he formed a psychological bridge to the collective suffering in his time, which he called the mystery of the self sacrifice of people. He turned his eyes inward and became aware of his frightfulness. The subsequent catastrophes of two world wars, which not only destroyed a major part of the civilized world in Europe physically but also spiritually, had shown their self destructive powers inside his psyche long before they really occurred. This happened to a citizen of Switzerland, a non participant in wars, but Jung couldn't stand aside as a neutral observer. He felt guilty and took personal responsibility for what he dreamt. He had killed Siegfried. He could not understand his confused state of mind after this dream. It took him many more dreams and active imaginations before he could grasp its meaning. I want to argue in this chapter that a transformation of the collective symbols, blood, hero, sacrifice, and victim, can be found at the very heart of Jung's unconscious process, a shift from sacrifice to suffering, from superiority to weakness. This shift has a political dimension as well. It is a lesson in peacemaking. I have called it psychological pacifism, which is different from most of the pacifist ideologies because this type is based upon a psychological rationale and not upon the moral superiority of peacemaking and the peacemaker.
Great. Um, okay, so I think it's for those that haven't read the Red Book directly, I think it's worthwhile to go back and look at the first chapter or even the pre-chapter of the Red Book. So I have the actual Red Book here, um, and I want to go back to the passage where he realized that something was happening. And okay, so keep in mind that Jung is talking about the spirit of this time and the spirit of the depths. And what he's referring to, we can say in 2020 hindsight, is that he is uh, there's a spirit of the time that carries us along, but there is also a spirit of the depths. And that spirit goes back to the 6 million-year-old man. And by man I mean human. And in this case, Jung is realizing that all of his being is tied up in events like this. And um, blood is a very significant uh, what do I want to say? It's a significant symbol of change happening in the human psyche. Okay, and that has been true since the time of Christ and before the time of Christ. Okay, so I'm just trying to find the exact place I want. Okay, so I'm on page 121 of the Red Book, uh, in the Reader's Edition version, and I'm after his discussion of the supreme meaning. And he says, the spirit of this time in me wanted to recognize the greatness and extent of the supreme meaning, but not its littleness. The spirit of the depths, however, conquered this arrogance, and I had to swallow the small as well as the healing of the immortal in me. It completely burned up my innards since it was inglorious and unheroic. It was even ridiculous and revolting, but the pliers of the spirit of the depths held me, and I had to drink the bitterest of all draughts. The spirit of this time tempted me with the thought that all this belongs to the shadowiness of the God image. This would be pernicious deception, since the shadow is nonsense. But the small, narrow, and banal is not nonsense, but on the one of both of the essences of the Godhead. I resisted recognizing that the everyday belongs to the image of the Godhead. I fled this thought. I hid myself behind the highest and coldest stars. But the spirit of the depths caught up with me, and forced the bitter drink between my lips. The spirit of this time whispered to me, this supreme meaning, this image of God, this melding together of the hot and the cold, that is in you and only you. But the spirit of the depths spoke to me and said, you are an image of the unending world. All the last mysteries of becoming and passing away live in you. Sorry, I lost my place. Okay, sorry. I looked away, lost my place. I'm going to start the paragraph again. The spirit of this time whispered to me, this supreme meaning, this image of God, this melting together of the hot and the cold, that is you and only you. But the spirit of the depth spoke to me and said, you are an image of the unending world. All the last mysteries of becoming and passing away live in you. If you did not possess all this, how could you know? For the sake of my human weakness, the spirit of the depths gave me this word. Yet this word is also superfluous, since I do not speak it freely, but because I must. I speak because the spirit robs me of joy and life if I do not speak. I am the serf who brings it and does not know what he carries in his hand. It would burn the hands if he did not place it where my master orders him to lay it. The spirit of our time spoke to me and said, what dire urgency could be forcing you to speak all this? This was the awful temptation. I wanted to ponder what inner or outer bind could force me into this, and because I found nothing that I could grasp, I was near to making one up. But with this, the spirit of our time had almost brought it about that instead of speaking, I was thinking again about reasons and explanations. We'll call that mansplaining. But but the spirit of the depth spoke to me and said, to understand a thing is a bridge and possibility to return, the possibility of return to the path. But to explain a matter is arbitrary and sometimes even murder. Have you counted the murderers among the scholars? But the spirit of this time stepped up to me and laid before me huge volumes that contain all of my knowledge. And their pages were made of ore, and a steel stylus had engraved inexorable words in them. And he pointed to these inexorable words and spoke to me and said, what you speak, this is madness. It is true. It is true. What I speak is the greatness and the intoxication and ugliness of madness. But the spirit of the depths stepped up to me and said, what you speak, the greatness is, the intoxication is, the undignified sick, paltry dailiness is. It runs in all the streets, lives in all the houses, and rules the day of all humanity. Even the eternal stars are commonplace. It is the great mistress and the one essence of God. One laughs about it. The laughter too is. Do you believe, man of this time, that laughter is lower than worship? Where is your measure, false measurer? The sum of life decides in laughter and in worship, not in your judgment. I must also speak the ridiculous, you coming men. You will recognize the supreme meaning by the fact that he is laughter and worship, a bloody laughter and a bloody worship. A sacrificial blood binds the poles. Those who know this laugh and worship in the same breath. After this, however, my humanity approached me and said, What solitude, what coldness of desolation you lay upon me when you speak such. Reflect of the destruction of being and the streams of blood from the terrible sacrifice that the depths demand. But the spirit of the depths said, no one can or should halt sacrifice. Sacrifice is not destruction. Sacrifice is the foundation stone of what is to come. Have you not had monasteries? Have you not countless thousands gone into the desert? You should carry the monastery in yourself. The desert is within you. The desert calls you and draws you back. And if you were fettered to the world of this time and with iron, the call of the desert would break all chains. Truly, I prepare you for solitude. After this, my humanity remained silent. Something happened to my spirit, however, which I must call mercy. My speech is imperfect, not because I want to shine with words, but out of the impossibility of finding those words. I speak in images. With nothing else can I express the words from the depths. The mercy which happened to me gave me belief, hope, and sufficient daring not to resist further the spirit of the depths, but to utter his word. But before I could pull myself together to really do it, I needed a visible sign that would show me that the spirit of the depths in me was at the same time the ruler of the depths of world affairs. It happened in October of the year 1913, as I was leaving alone for a journey, that during the day I was suddenly overcome in broad daylight by a vision. I saw a terrible flood that covered all the northern and low-lying lands between the North Sea and the Alps. It reached from England to Russia, and from the coast of the North Sea right up to the Alps. I saw yellow waves, swimming rubble, and the death of countless thousands. This vision lasted for 2 hours. It confused me and made me ill. I was not able to interpret it. 2 weeks passed, then the vision returned, still more violent than before, and an inner voice spoke, quote, look at it. It is completely real, and it will come to pass. You cannot doubt this, unquote. I wrestled again for 2 hours with this vision, but it held me fast. It left me exhausted and confused, and I thought my mind had gone crazy. From then on, the anxiety toward the terrible event that stood directly before us kept coming back. Once I also saw a sea of blood over the northern lands. In the year 1914, in the month of June, at the beginning and the end of the month, and at the beginning of July, I had the same dream 3 times. I was in a foreign land, and suddenly overnight, and right in the middle of summer, a terrible cold descended from space. All seas and rivers were locked in ice. Every green living thing had frozen. In the second dream was thoroughly similar to this, but the third dream at the beginning of July went as follows. I was in a remote English land. It was necessary that I return to my homeland with a fast ship to speed as speedily as possible. I reached home quickly. In my homeland, I found in the middle of summer a terrible cold that had fallen from space, which had turned every living thing into ice. There stood a leaf-bearing but fruitless tree, whose leaves had turned into sweet grapes, but full of healing juice through the working of the frost. I picked some grapes and gave them to a great waiting throng. In reality, now it was so. At the time when the Great War broke out, between the peoples of Europe. I found myself in Scotland, compelled by the war to choose the fastest ship and the shortest route home. I encountered the colossal cold that froze everything. I met up with the flood, the sea of blood, and found my barren tree, where leaves, whose leaves the frost had transformed into a remedy. And I plucked the ripe fruit and gave it to you. And I do not know what I poured out for you, what bittersweet, intoxicating drink which left on your tongues an aftertaste of blood. Believe me, it is no teaching and no instruction that I give you. On what basis should I promise to teach you? I give you news of the way of this man, but not of your own way. My path is not your path. Therefore, I cannot teach you. The way is within us, but not in God's, nor in teachings, nor in laws. Within us is the way, the truth, and the life. Woe betide those who live by way of examples. Life is not with them. If you live according to an example, you thus live the life of that example. But who should live your own life if not yourself? So live yourselves. The signposts have all fallen. Unblazed trails lie before us. Do not be greedy to gobble up the fruits of foreign fields. Do you not know that you yourselves are the fertile acre, which bears everything that avails you? Yet who today knows this? Who knows the way to the eternally fruitful climes of the soul? You seek the way through mere appearances. You seek the way through mere appearances. You study books and give ear to all kinds of opinion. What good is all that? There is only one way, and that is your way. You seek the path. I warn you away from my own. It can also be the wrong way for you. May each go his own way. I will be no savior, no lawgiver, no master teacher unto you. You are no longer little children. Giving laws, bettering, making things easier has all become wrong and evil. May each one seek out his own way. The way leads to mutual love in community. Men will come to see and feel the similarity and community of their ways. Laws and teachings held in common compel people to solitude so that they may escape the pressure of undesirable contact. But solitude makes people hostile and venomous. Therefore, give people dignity and let each of them stand apart so that each may find his own fellowship and love it. Power stands against power, contempt against contempt, love against love. Give humanity dignity and trust that life will find the better way. The one eye of the Godhead is blind. The one ear of the Godhead is deaf. The order of its being is crossed by chaos. So be patient with the crippledness of the world and do not overvalue its consummate beauty. Okay, I ended up reading more than I intended, but that offers some context for where Jung was at this point in 1914. Okay. Michelle, do you have a comment before we go on?
Um, it was crazy that in my red book, the red bookmark was on page 119. So I
Oh,
was on
wow.
page before you. I was at, yeah,
We're at the supreme meaning.
yeah. Um, so
Do you want to read that? Since
sure.
synchronistically that came before what I just read.
Okay. Page 119. Um, this was written in the year 1915. If I speak in the spirit of this time, I must say no one and nothing can justify what I must proclaim to you. Justification is superfluous to me since I have no choice. But I have learned that in addition to the spirit of this time, there is still another spirit at work, namely that which rules the depths of everything contemporary. The spirit of this time would like to hear of use and value. I also thought this way, and my humanity still thinks this way. But that other spirit forces me nevertheless to speak beyond justification, use, and meaning. Filled with human pride and blinded by the presumptuousness spirit of the times, I long sought to hold that other spirit away from me. But I did not consider that the spirit of the depths from this time immemorial and for all the future possesses a greater power than the spirit of this time, who changes with the generations. The spirit of the depths has subjugated all pride and arrogance to the power of judgment. He took away my belief in science. He robbed me of the joy of explaining and ordering things, and he let devotion to the ideals of this time die out to me. He forced me down to the last and simplest things. The spirit of the depths took my understanding all and all my knowledge and placed them at the service of the inexplicable and the paradoxical. He robbed me of my speech and writing of everything that was not in his service, namely the melting together of sense and nonsense, which produces the supreme meaning. But the supreme meaning is the path, the way, and the bridge to what is to come. That is the God yet to come. It is not the coming God himself, but his image which appears in the supreme meaning. God is an image, and those who worship him must worship him in the image of the supreme meaning. The supreme meaning is not a meaning and not an absurdity. It is image and force in one, magnificence and force together. The supreme meaning is the beginning and the end. It is the bridge of going across and fulfillment. The other gods died of their temporality, yet the supreme meaning never dies. It turns into meaning and then into absurdity, and out of the fire and blood of their collision, the supreme meaning rises up, rejuvenated anew. The image of the God has a shadow. The supreme meaning is real and casts a shadow. For what can be actual and corporeal and have no shadow? The shadow is nonsense. It lacks force and has no continued existence through itself. But nonsense is the inseparable and undying brother of the supreme meaning. Like plants, so men grow, some in the light, others in the shadow. There are many who need the shadows and not the light. The image of God throws a shadow that is just as great as itself. The supreme meaning is great and small. It is as wide as the space of the starry heavens and as narrow as the cells of the living body.
I think we can never read that um, too much because in the end, um, this prefatory chapter, I guess, of the Red Book is it's the first place in the Red Book where Jung's own words appear. Um, really sum up the essence of his teaching. So this is the first chapter of the Red Book. Okay, and one other thing he um, mentioned here is that he speaks in images, and uh, it's until I heard a talk by Edward Edinger, I didn't really understand what he meant by that. But the point is that, as Edinger puts it's one of Jung's paragraphs. Jung's paragraphs come as images, each paragraph. And each one is like a cheese ball at Christmas. Okay, it has many things in it, some delicious and some cheesy, whatever it is, but it's a whole thing. It's like a baseball that's got lots of things in it and puts it together. And so you can take any paragraph of the Red Book and read it backward, and it will mean exactly the same thing as reading it forward. And I discovered this some years ago. I had heard that someone was reading all the verses of the Bible into Twitter at the time. And so I decided I would read the Red Book into Twitter. But I very quickly discovered that when you read into Twitter forward, it appears to anybody who's reading Twitter backward, because the last thing you read is the top of the timeline. And so uh, what I decided to do was to read the sentences backward so that when people looked at the timeline on Twitter, they would be reading it forward or hearing it forward. And but in so doing, I came to the realization that it means exactly the same thing in whichever way you read it. And so that was Edinger's point, that each paragraph is this cheese ball or this baseball that is a total image that Jung is giving you through words, an image for your psyche, and it's up to you to interpret it as a whole thing, not as a linear thing, sentence by sentence. And so, anyway, I want to go on with this essay. However, okay, so here's this subtitle: The Narrative of Self-Sacrifice. The narrative of the Red Book is very complex. One might even doubt whether there is a consistent narrative at all. But looking closer, there are red threads that are interwoven throughout the text. Jung combined in this narrative the search for his lost soul and the guilt of being the murderer of the German warrior hero Siegfried, the mystery of the crucified Christ, and last but not least, the idea of the self-sacrifice of the people. These ideas were not primarily a result of conscious thought and reflection using psychological, theological, and political theories. The narrative of the Red Book is made of intuition. The contents of the first layer were constituted by long and irritating active imaginations. Jung ended up in Liber Primus at the feet of the crucified Christ, becoming Christ himself with Mary as his mother. And he met up with archaic gods during his inner journey, such as Mime from the Nibelung saga and the Leontocephalus of the Mithraic mysteries. Did he suffer from an inflation brought about by spiritual images of gods and goddesses? Probably not. in my opinion. Rather, he opened his conscious mind to the dark side of religious experiences from the unconscious, similar to what he attempted with his confused state of mind after his dream of murdering Siegfried. He tried to solve the riddles and the mysteries. He tried to understand what Christ's self-sacrifice on the cross could mean for himself, for his personal search, but also for the collective, for the anthropological mystery of self-destruction inherent in humankind. Jung was very much aware of the risks of his experiment. We should keep in mind that the acting, dreaming, storytelling, observing, and reflecting protagonist, i.e., the ego or the Red Book of the Red Book, is not identical with the Swiss citizen Carl Gustav Jung. As he wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, during this period, he would carefully assure himself of the facts of his life, recalling that he was living in Seestrasse 228 in Küsnacht near Zurich, that he was married and had 5 children, and thus he stayed grounded and did not get carried away by inflationary pressures from the unconscious. The Red Book is a book of dreams, visions, active imaginations, prophecies, or, as one might say, of inner happenings. But it is also a subjective report of historical facts. The outer events corresponded with his inner happenings. Were they also the consequence of collective inner happenings? One might stay skeptical about this view. However, these inner happenings could be interpreted as a political message of the Red Book. Jung's dreaming and imaging ego reflected human destructiveness and the war psychologically as an inner event. Taking the narrative of the Red Book seriously means that it contains a political message. Jung did not imagine himself as a political leader, nor did he preach from the height of a pulpit. Rather, he went through a dangerous and mysterious journey through the underworld. Uncertainty and confusion about the complex matters discovered there prevail. Subjective uncertainty can also be deducted from the making of the text itself. Every passage of his drafts was corrected. Long passages of the different drafts were eliminated and rewritten. This is further evidence of his uncertainty. Okay, I'll stop there for a minute and see how you all are reacting to this. Sheree, thank you for your comment. And Deborah says this is very Taoist sounding. Yes, it may be. I agree with that. And Sheree says, isn't Jung the legendary eye opener? Yeah, Deborah, it's like a Mobius strip that was different, that has different sides that end up reinforcing the one. And Sheree says, rest in peace, Jane Goodall. I watched her memorial at the Washington National Memorial on November 13th. It was so moving. And Kathy says, Jane Goodall is a legendary woman. And yes, and I'd just like to mention by synchronicity, because I did not watch the National Memorial, but last night my wife and I watched a documentary which appears on Netflix. And it was a conversation with Jane Goodall with the agreement between her and the interviewer that the contents of the interview would not be published until after her death. And it was quite an amazing event because they had arranged 5 cameras uh, for the interview. And although there were cameramen working remotely, they could not hear what Jane Goodall was saying during the interview. And and they did a beautiful job of switching back and forth between Jane Goodall and the interviewer. And at the end, um, by previous agreement, the um, the interviewer walked out of the theater and left Jane alone uh, in the place and allowed her to speak her last words. And the whole thing was incredibly moving. And so I urge you to look at it. I think the documentary is called The Last Words of Jane Goodall, and I believe it's on Netflix. I think that's where we were watching it. Never says Goodall has a prescient name that she lived up to fully. I would say so. And Kathy says, I will watch that show on Netflix later. Thank you for reminding me about it. Yeah, it's quite a special event. Okay, and as you see by my demeanor that um, that I'm quite moved. I was quite moved by it last night. Okay, and Michelle, are you still there?
Yes.
Do you
Yes,
want
I'm
to
still
read
here.
read a little bit more?
Sure.
Okay, we'll take turns.
All right. The part one.
Yeah, part one.
Okay. Part one, the self-sacrifice of a beautiful hero. Then Siegfried's horn resounded over the mountains with a jubilant sound. We knew that our mortal enemy was coming. We were armed and lurked beside a narrow, rocky path to murder him. Then we saw him coming high across the mountains on a chariot made of the bones of the dead. He drove boldly and magnificently over the steep rocks and arrived at the narrow path where we were hiding. As he came around the turn ahead of us, we fired at the same time and he fell slain. Therefore I turned to flee, and a terrible rain swept down. But after this I went through a torment unto death, and I felt certain that I must kill myself if I could not solve the riddle of the murder of the hero. Should I stop here or keep going?
Uh, well, all right. Let me take a paragraph and then I'm going to need to take a bio break, but let me take the next paragraph. Let me try to solve the riddle. First, I will give some general consideration to the significance of the warrior hero. For an individual, the warrior hero is a psychological figure of personal development, a symbol of individuation. For the collective, he is a mythic, historical, and political figure. As a powerful collective symbol, he was utilized for political purposes in all times and under all political circumstances. This collective figure was killed by Jung's protagonist, Ego, and his dark companion. Okay. All right, so you go ahead. I'll be right back.
Siegfried is a warrior hero par excellence. During his mythological studies for his work, Transformations and Symbols of the Libido from 1911 to 1912, Jung had already dealt extensively with Siegfried. He was well known to him from the medieval epos of the Nibelungs. The figure of Siegfried therefore forms a bridge to Jung's earlier work. The first comment to the dream is made in the Red Book itself by a dream figure, the spirit of the depths. The highest truth is one and the same with the absurd. This statement saved me. In his seminar on analytical psychology of 1925, Jung commented this dream for the first time in public. Siegfried was not an especially sympathetic figure to me. Nevertheless, my dream showed him to be my hero. I felt an enormous pity for him, as though I myself had been shot. I must then have had a hero I did not appreciate, and it was my ideal of force and efficiency I had killed. I had killed my intellect. I disposed my superior function. As soon as the main function is deposed, there is a chance for other sides of the personality to be born into life. Jung interpreted the consequences of this dethroning psychologically. The superior side of his personality had to give way to another side. Which one would that be? The strong suicidal effect hints at the violent impulse towards self-punishment, self-destruction, self-sacrifice. Other effects are sympathetic with the hero, mourning over the loss, feelings of guilt, shame for cowardice because he could only succeed in shooting him in an ambush. These feelings threatened to overwhelm the dreamer. He barely succeeded in not losing his self-control after awakening. The insight that the highest truth and the absurd, well, I'll start that again. The insight that the highest truth and the absurd are one and the same tells us that something unexpected and very important had taken place. Jung had changed his orientation in respect to the hero when he deposed his inner superior function, Siegfried. He began to say farewell to the warrior hero inside. Instead, he now recognized his own weakness, his incapacity, a topic that is thoroughly reflected on later in the Red Book. Jung regained his stability by accepting his weaknesses, his inferiority. Paradoxically, despite his inferiority, he succeeded in killing the invincible, magnificent, beautiful German hero. The weaker may be the winner because he disposes of weapons and is able to arrange alliances, in this case with a brown savage. Anyways, the invincibility of the Germanic hero turned out to be an illusion. He didn't act cautiously, so he rode triumphantly to his death. The inadvertent self-sacrifice of the hero.
Okay.
Young, okay.
Jung took the savage to represent his instinctive dark side. Jung's inner Siegfried had to die in order to give life to the part of his personality that was centered in inadequacy. But this part could not expose itself at this time. It had to hide itself and cover its tracks by a great rain. The image of the heavy rain picks up the earlier symbol of the flood and links the Siegfried dream to the visions of the flood of blood over Europe and the world of biblical imagery. Jung felt the loss of the murdered hero. He was overwhelmed by tears and mourning. He felt he could not live any longer if he could not solve the riddle. The riddle dealt with Siegfried's sacrifice and Jung's impulse to his own self-sacrifice by shooting himself. The solution to the riddle was to accept weakness and incapacity, to value suffering, emotions, and the basic wish to survive higher than the aesthetics of heroism. The connotations of the Germanic hero changed thoroughly. To Wagner, Siegfried had been the free man, the rebel without fear. Siegfried showed up in Jung's dreams, first as an enemy, as a killer and destroyer, and then as a loser and victim. The protagonist, moreover, Jung's alter ego, Siegfried's murderer, is shown as a coward who simply wants to survive. Okay, now I want to talk about this and heroism for a minute. Um, because in the past week, it so happened that we had the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Marine Corps, and it has been my custom on the birthday of the Marine Corps to wear my uniform to school, which is my privilege as a retired officer. And so I did that. And I also purchased a cake. Um, and let's see, I think I might have a picture of it here, uh, of the cake at least. Let me just see. Ah, yes. Just a minute. Well, okay. Oh, wait a minute. Let's get it right side up. Okay. Um, let's see. Here we go. All right. So I purchased this cake for November 10th. It's the birthday of the Marine Corps. And just here's the secret gouge, which is that um, it's customary on November 10th to wish all Marines that you happen to know, past or present, happy birthday. Um, and that's a custom that many of my friends and uh, my children all remember and wish me a happy birthday on that day. Uh, but I did not do this because I consider myself a hero. And let's see, I want to show you one other picture. Um, okay, so this lady in this photograph is the custodian in my school, and she saw me come out of my office and said, "Oh, Marine," and then she insisted on having her picture taken with me, and it turned out that two of her sons are current U.S. Marines at Camp Lejeune, and so that was a little bit of my life on Monday. But someone said to me, "Thank you for your service," and for me, and she recognized this immediately, being a counselor. She recognized that for me, that's like uh, fingernails on a chalkboard. Um, and the reason is multiple. Number one, I don't feel I was heroic by serving, and number two, I think it's been overdone and has been used as a crutch for the right wing of our society at this point. Um, and I have always felt thanked since the beginning. I acknowledge that there were some of my brethren who came back through San Francisco International Airport and who were spit upon their arrival, and that was an awful thing. But that did not happen to me. I came back, and my father-in-law at that time had taken a full-size door and written on it in huge letters, "Welcome home, Skip," and had mounted it over his garage door in his home. So that would be the first thing that I saw. when I came back into the family. Um, and when I was a first lieutenant in Vietnam, I did nothing that was heroic. And I think that most people who are heroes are ordinary people who make an unconscious decision and an instantaneous decision to do something that later people see as heroic. So I worked for a colonel for 3 months of my time in Vietnam, who had won the Navy Cross in Korea. That is the second highest military honor. And I'm sure that this man um, had gotten into some awful situation and had to fight his way out of it. And that's typical of people who get awarded medals for heroism. Um, and so we go in not knowing if we will be a hero or can be a hero, and the decision to do a heroic act is an unconscious decision. And so one time I was at the Alamo, as a matter of fact, in San Antonio, with a colleague, and that colleague, who was a person that about my age, had said to me that he felt embarrassed that he had not served, and and I had voluntarily joined the Marine Corps, um, and I had my own reasons for that. But um, I said, "But don't you see, I went so you wouldn't have to go," and uh, and that's the point. Uh, some of us have a reason to decide to serve in the military, and some don't. And when those of us who do serve for in whatever capacity, uh, we're doing it to defend our fellow citizens so that they don't have to. And so um, it's nothing to be embarrassed about by not going. And it's I guess it wasn't a conscious reason for me to join um, at the time, but as I thought about it later, when he said that to me, and I said, I went so you wouldn't have to. That was the reason. Um, so anyway, let's read on. Um, do you want to comment on any of that, Michelle? You're free to do so, of course.
Oh, sure. Well, I was wondering this whole week why I was thinking about my ex.
Uh,
Back in 2020, I was engaged to a former Marine, and like I thought, I mean, I'd gotten married before, but I thought this was the one. Like I thought, when you just think that this is it, like, and then um I don't know. I guess after a time, like I just started going through the motions and I just gradually got unhappy. But it's just crazy because I've been thinking about him all week and I'm just like, part of me feels guilty about everything because even though it was unintentional, like I had every intention of making it work, there just came a point where like I had to choose myself. And So I've just been thinking about him like all week, which I try not to do. And the weird thing, like, even though it was years ago that he left the Marines, he still woke up at 5 a.m. every day.
As do I.
Like clockwork.
You know,
I don't know how they do that or
I
like what they must have done.
and I remember my father, who was not a Marine, he was a naval officer, had gone to the Naval Academy near where I live, and he woke up at 4:45 every day, quarter to five, and he used to refer to it as quarter to five. But I would come down in the kitchen and he'd be there smoking a cigarette at quarter to five every morning without fail. Um, okay. Um, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, um, the point of the 250th anniversary of the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps that's just passed us is a time to reflect on what the United States is and stands for in the world. And of course, the Red Book is a part of that, a major part of it, because Dr. Jung was realizing something about humanity that had never been expressed before. The the idea of the collective unconscious. Um, and in 1956, when he was interviewed for the BBC, the interviewer was at his house in Kuznets, and he asked him what was, he says, of course, we know about, um, the personality types and all those things that are associated with your psychology, but what do you think is the most important thing that you did psychologically in your career? And he said, "Oh, that's the collective unconscious." And that's what we've been talking about here. That he recognized the collective unconscious, and these passages that we've been reading today are about that. And so, all right. But anyway, let us move on. We have 45 minutes to go, and I'd like to try to get through the rest of this. So maybe you and I can switch off. I'll read the next paragraph and then we'll go. Part two, the self-sacrifice of the crucified God. God has abandoned man. The idea of self-sacrifice found its second expression in Jung's active imagination on December 25th, 1913. Jung reported on this in the last chapter of Liber Primus called Resolution. On the third night, deep longing to continue experiencing the mysteries seized me. The struggle between doubt and desire was great in me. It is the third night of Jung's night sea journey, which fell on Christmas Day, 1913, and he found himself confronting pagan gods, biblical and mythological figures, the divine child, and the crucified God. The third night is perhaps a hint to the third night after Christ's crucifixion, the night before the resurrection. But let me first sum up the visionary waking dream before getting closer to the analogy of self-sacrifice. During the previous two nights, Jung's protagonist's ego had encountered the biblical prophet, Elijah, and his companion, Salome. This time Elijah was standing alone on the heights. On the dark side of the rocks lay a black serpent. On the bright side, a white serpent. A terrible wrestling of the two ensued. It seemed as if the black serpent would overcome the white one. But but then they withdrew, and the head and front side of the black serpent had turned white, had turned white. Then Elijah climbed onto a summit. There was a masonry building made of huge blocks with a large courtyard, and in the middle of it, an altar. There, Elijah proclaimed that this would be the temple of the sun. Climbing down, he became smaller until he was a dwarf and called himself Mime, the dwarf of the Nibelung saga. Mime says, quote, "Here are my wells. Whoever drinks from them becomes wise," unquote. The ego follows him into the cave but cannot reach the water. Instead of wisdom, confusion prevails. Quote, "I lose courage. I leave the cave and, doubting, pace back and forth in the square of the yard. Everything appears to me strange and incomprehensible," unquote. Now he comes to the central scenery of the active imagination. Here is what Jung writes. Okay, Michelle.
Sure. I am seized with fear at what I see. I see the cross, the removal of the cross, the mourning. I see the divine child with the white serpent in his right hand and the black serpent in his left hand. I see the green mountain, the cross of Christ on it, and a stream of blood flowing from the summit. I see the cross and Christ on it in his last hour and torment. At the foot of the cross, the black serpent coils itself. It has wound itself around my feet. I am held fast and I spread my arms wide. Salome draws near. The serpent has wound itself around my whole body, and my countenance is that of a lion. Salome says, "You are Christ. I stand with outstretched arms like someone crucified. The serpent squeezes my body in its terrible coils, and the blood streams from my body, spilling down the mountainside. Salome bends down to my feet and wraps her black hair around them. She lies thus for a long time. Then she cries, 'I see light.' Elijah says, 'Your work is fulfilled here. Other things will come. Seek untiringly, seek untiringly, and above all, write exactly what you see.' Elijah transforms into a huge flame of white light, and I hurry out into the night, like one who has no part in the glory of the mystery. My feet do not touch the ground of this earth, and it is as I were melting into air."
Perhaps we can feel empathy and pity for this rather young man of 39 years, whose psyche became the inner scene of a human tragedy of extraordinary dimensions. But we can also feel the distance of an observing ego. Jung's visions and active imagination were registered and written down as exactly as possible by this observer ego. This was the order of Elijah, to seek untiringly and write exactly what he sees. What does he see? Go ahead.
Oh. One significant feature of the vision is the location of the Temple of the Sun in the mountains. Here we enter the sphere of the Mithra-
Mithraic.
Mithraic mysteries. In the Roman Empire during the first centuries, the 25th of December was celebrated not only as the birthday of Christ, but also of Mithras, the son of the sun. The lentocephalus is one of the main symbols of the
Mithraic.
Mithric
Mithraic.
mysteries, as Jung himself mentioned in his 1925 seminar on analytical psychology.
But the central theme is another one. The protagonist, ego of Jung's vision turned the dramatic experiences of Christ on the cross into his own inner experience. The mimetic similarity between Jung's protagonist ego and Christ includes the body feeling of hanging on the cross, of suffering Christ's mortal agony, of blood pouring out of his body and down the summit, even of Mary being his mother, and in the end, of Christ's resurrection as a spiritual body when he lost the contact to the earth, melting into air.
The narrator confesses to a struggle between doubt and desire. A deep longing to experience the mysteries seized him at the beginning, but in the end he had no part in the glory of the mystery. He remained a stranger, someone who was not initiated into the mystery. Here again we find a distance from the numinous idea of the sacrifice. Doubt is winning over desire. Thus, the sense of identity with the holy victim, the sacrifice, is undermined. The sacrifice of the warrior hero changes to the sacrifice of Christ and into the self sacrifice of Jung's protagonist ego. Sacrifice turns into victimhood, glory into suffering.
Nearly at the same time as Jung experienced these active imaginations, the symbol of the cross became the center of a theological movement called the theology of the cross. In 1911, the German theologian Martin Kohler gave a lecture declaring the cross to be the foundation and measure of Christology. Jürgen Moltmann, uh, writing his works after World War II, stated that the theology of the cross had previously to this enjoyed only a certain modest position in Christian tradition, but never was put at in the center, beginning with Paul and continuing all the way to Luther. It was significantly present mostly in the persecuted religious communities. Moltmann understood his affection for the theology of the cross to be a consequence of his experiences in World War II. The survivors of my generation came back torn and defeated from concentration camps and military hospitals into the lecture halls. A theology which would not have spoken of God with regard to the abandoned crucified would not have got through to us. Moltmann quoted Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who had written in a letter from prison close to his execution by the Nazi regime, quote, God allows himself to be shoved out of the world on a cross. God is powerless and weak in the world, and only in this way is he with us and helps us. Following Matthew 8:17, it is absolutely clear that Christ does not help with his almightiness, but with his weakness, his suffering. Only the suffering of God can help. This is the reversal of everything that the religious man expects from God. It is man's task to co-suffer emphatically with God's suffering in a godless world. Moltmann stressed, without perception of the pain, of the negative, Christian hope cannot be realistic and effective, breaking free.
Maltman and Bonhoeffer came to the same conclusion that Jung reached in his Red Book. Weakness, pain, and suffering are the characteristics of the image of God in a godless world. Man is called to suffer together with God from a world without God. The paradoxical message is that participation in the negative and in pain can free one from suffering, and this message represents the same solution to the riddle of self sacrifice. to the mystery of Christ's self-sacrifice.
Good. All right. Just look. I'm looking for something. Oh, here it is. I just wanted to share with you um, an image of a painting that I did for one of my grandsons. My grandson is currently at Hillsdale College, which is a fundamentalist Christian college in northern Michigan. It's very famous, and they do wonderful work with writings, and especially they hold um, many of the archives of Winston Churchill, among other things. But um, anyway, my grandson has gone off and is a freshman at Hillsdale College right now. And so I have prepared for him a painting. I think he may end up in the ministry, this grandson of mine. And so this is the painting that I prepared for him. And of course, I intended to create a cross, and I intended for it to be reflective. And in fact, if you see it in real life, this image has lots of reflectivity in it because almost all of the paint in this was reflective paint. However, um, I had not thought about putting blood into it, uh, but almost on an intuition, I put a big blob of scarlet blood, as you see here, and it ran down, and this became a very powerful image to me. Although I'm not a very active practicing Christian, this image became pretty powerful to me because it represents the humanity of Jesus Christ in his suffering. Um, and it was completely by intuition. I had no intention of putting that scarlet drip down the painting until I just did it. And there it was. And so when you take a photograph of reflective paint, it you can't get it all, and so you have to angle the painting so that at least one side of it shows the reflectivity of it, which you can see. But the fact is that in the original of this painting, it's reflective in every direction, just as it is on the right in what you see here. But unfortunately, you can't photograph that. So anyway, that's going to be a Christmas present. Or it's actually for his 21st birthday, but
That's a big one.
yeah, it's a 18 by 24 painting. So it'll be a big cross that'll be his cross to bear, I'm afraid, in a physical sense.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of pictures of Jesus with like his heart on fire and blood coming out of it.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, that I could not render an image of Jesus, but that I could do. So anyway, I'll read on. Part three, the self-sacrifice of the people. At that time, the loving light was annihilated, and blood began to pour out. This was the Great War. But the spirit of the depths wants this struggle to be understood as a conflict in every man's own nature. Since men do not know that the conflict occurs inside themselves, they go mad and one lays the blame on the other. If one half of the mankind is at fault, then every man is half at fault. but he does not see the conflict in his own soul, which is, however, the source of the outer disaster. If you are aggravated against your brother, think that you are aggravated against the brother in you. That is, against what in you is similar to your brother. You want to go on? Are you with me?
Yeah. That reminds me in the program, in the 12-step program,
Mhm.
we have this special prayer. It's called the sick man for when you're having extreme resentment towards another person. Um, which alcoholics have a lot of. It's called the sick man's prayer, and it goes, God, when a person offends me, help me to remember this is a sick person. Help me to show the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Show me how I can be helpful to them. Save me from being angry, thy will be done. Yeah, save me from being angry.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, that's very helpful with uh, what I'm struggling with my colleague at the moment, uh, because I do recognize that um, this is something that she's struggling with, and I'm really looking for a way. I mean, the situation gives truth to the saying, if a man speaks in the desert and no woman hears him, is he still wrong? And the answer is, well, sure, that's right. Um, but this lady has gotten to the point where she won't let me speak a sentence without contradicting me. And it on Friday it became too much, and unfortunately it caused one child to miss half a day of school because of her behavior, and that's not okay with me. And so anyway, okay, so you want to read on, or as a
Sure.
man?
As a man, you are part of mankind, and therefore you have a share in the whole of mankind, as if you were the whole of mankind. If you overpower and kill your fellow man who is contrary to you, then you also kill that person in yourself and have murdered a part of your life. The spirit of this dead man follows you and does not let your life become joyful. You need your wholeness to live onward. Therefore, they all say that they are fighting for the good and for peace, but one cannot fight one another over the good. But since men don't know that the conflict lies within themselves, the Germans thus believe that the English and the Russians are wrong. But the English and the Russians say that the Germans are wrong. But no one can judge history in terms of right and wrong, because one half of mankind is wrong, every man is half wrong. Therefore, a conflict resides in his own soul. But man appears to see the outer quarrel, not the one within, which alone is the wellspring of the great war. But before man can ascend to light and love, the great battle is needed.
This is just the opposite of what really happened in the heroic societies of Europe. They were on their way to destruction and self-sacrifice, while Jung recommended, while Jung recommended. So do not be heroes, be clever and drop the heroics, since nothing is more dangerous than to play the hero. Jung was recommending what might be called psychological pacifism, although he himself did not use this term. He suggested the path of introversion, in order to reintegrate the dissociated other half of man. This aim is to restore wholeness by overcoming the dissociation of the ego and the inner other. The enemy is a part of the self. The conflicts leading to war are not conflicts of right versus wrong or the external or of external factors. Although we read the contrary every day, it is the conflicts lying inside man himself that lead to war, conflicts within the psyche of every man. The pacifist movements of Jung's contemporaries charged economic and political powers with being responsible for wars. Their no to war motto resulted from a superior moral standpoint and from pessimism in regard to the human ability to suppress destructive forces. Peacemaking, consequently, could only be achieved by laws and societal institutions, not by individuals and their personal psychological development. Jung's argument did not rest on a basically positive view of human character that would ask everyone to fight for the good and for peace. Jung argued instead for the opposite viewpoint, from the fundamental idea of the shadow being a part of every human subject. The conflict within the psyche had to be solved. In the end, then, it would make no sense uh, any longer to project one shadow on the other and fight with the other. This procedure would necessarily be seen as self-destructive because the other is the other half of oneself. A psychological pacifism, therefore, can only be symbolized by a broken hero, a hero in his weakness. The symbol of the magnificent hero would hide self-destructiveness behind his self-sacrifice. Okay, Michelle, go ahead.
The integration of the other is the deeper meaning and aim of the sacrifice of the hero. This integration involves a process of psychological transformation. This idea differs fundamentally from Freud's death drive. Jung's concept of self sacrifice is a psychological, cultural, and anthropological concept. Psychological pacifism is also a political concept. Freud's concept, on the other hand, is basically a biological concept. Culturally, the narrative of the Red Book deals with the symbolic death of the hero with 1,000 faces, to reference Joseph Campbell's famous book written much later. Nothing is more dangerous than to play the hero, as Jung wrote.
What does Jung's impulse to shoot himself after he had murdered Siegfried mean? He wanted to integrate his guilt of being the murderer of Siegfried by sharing the suffering of the warrior hero, Siegfried. As we have seen, this was followed by a transformation of the hero symbol and a farewell to the warrior hero as a bright, proud, and mighty image of the self. The warrior hero came down from the heights of his inflated sense of self and unified himself with his murderers in death. At the end of Liber Primus, the dark and white serpents fight each other and end fighting by integrating parts of each other, as symbolized by their colors. Christ and Jung's imagining ego suffer together the same tortures and abandonment.
Right. The idea of the self-sacrifice of the people is the third manifestation of self-sacrifice in the Red Book. World War I historically turned out to be the collective destiny of heroic societies, a term used by political scientists in the beginning of the 21st century. European societies had transformed themselves during the pre-war period into heroic societies, as Moncler had shown. Now, in the beginning of the 21st century, as a result of two world wars, there is a shift in Western Europe to so-called post-heroic societies. The collective attitude towards the self-sacrifice of the hero has changed profoundly.
Jung was one of the few individuals who recognized that the self-sacrifice of the people should not only be regarded as an outer event, as quarrels among peoples. There should be a psychological transformation. If people looked upon as individuals would learn their lesson about their own collective and individual's destructiveness, their suffering would change into a lesson in peacemaking. These ideas of Jung would mean a fundamental lesson in peacemaking by psychological means. The transformation of symbols that form the center of the hero complex, from the blood shed by an individual hero to the streams of blood lost by masses of soldiers and civilians, from sacrifice to victim, from heroic strengths to weakness, from superiority to inferiority, changes the content of the hero complex fundamentally. The post-heroic image of the suffering warrior could could support individuals in understanding themselves as if each one were the whole of mankind in their own wholeness.
But when Jung writes, but before man can ascend to light and love, the great battle is needed. What does he mean? This was Jung's conclusion after 3 years of numerous battles that left millions of people dead. The great battle was needed because otherwise the frightfulness would not be great enough to persuade people to turn their eyes inward. Despite the obvious pessimistic look at the historical facts, Jung's perspective remained a psychological pacifism, although Jung didn't name it this. In 1916, Jung wrote in his foreword to The Psychology of the Unconscious Processes, the psychological commitments of the present war, above all the incredible brutalization of public opinion, the mutual slanderings, the unprecedented fury of destruction, the monstrous flood of lies, and man's incapacity to call a halt to the bloody demon are uniquely fitted to force upon the attention of every thinking person the problem of the chaotic unconscious which slumbers beneath the ordered world of consciousness. This war has pitilessly, pitis, pitilessly
Pitilessly, pitilessly.
revealed to civilized man that he is still barbarian. The psychology of the individual is reflected in the psychology of the nation. What the nation does is done also by each individual, and so long as the individual continues to it, the nation will do likewise. Only a change in the attitude of the individual can initiate a change in the psychology of the nation.
Jung was a seer, a political prophet in 1913. Yet he did not unveil his historical and political interpretations to his contemporaries. He did not publish his Red Book during his lifetime, and I think he would have been torn to pieces by his contemporaries if he had done so. His visions, dreams, and active imaginations would not have been taken seriously. He would have been treated as a lunatic or a traitor. The truth is that his contemporaries turned out to be lunatics because they were inflated by collective heroic and nationalist images. But his ideas were far beyond ordinary thinking, and they still are. The Red Book therefore remains a challenge for our time. Peace is not an outer event, but a state of integration of the split and dissociated part that is projected onto the other, the foreigner, the enemy. What idea what idea could touch more fundamentally on the global crisis of our present time? Yeah. Okay. Comments? That's the end of
Um,
that
It
essay.
really does speak to what is happening. I live in Palm Beach County, and it's the largest county in the United States. And there are a million people here. And when I, look at updates for the Ukraine war, like it always hits me like that's my whole county. Like everyone I see every day, like gone.
Mhm.
And of course I don't like that idea, and it just hits me randomly. But it's hard to like wrap my head around the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, as I look at the daily news, the news from Darfur, the news from Trump attacking speedboats in the Atlantic and the Pacific and the Caribbean, um, and all that those things mean, I I say, my God, we're just doing it again. Have we learned nothing? Um, it's it's really troubling to me. Um, but I think the most interesting thing to me, I'm going to have to take this book back upstairs with me and read this essay again, because I do have an interpersonal conflict right now, and my instinct is to go into this woman's classroom and just start screaming at her. And I'm usually a pacifist, and I've just been taking it from her for the whole of our first quarter. Um, but I can't do that. I don't want to do that. And I know that that's not going to solve anything if I do that. And so I think that what I'm going to do is write to her, but I have to think about my wording because I'm going to share whatever I write to her with my colleagues. Um, and uh, and so I want to very, very carefully craft something that will express to her that what was going on Friday is not okay. It's just not okay. Because as I said, I mean, we're an alt school, and part of the reason we're an alt school is we have some children who are very vulnerable, and uh, they've all experienced some trauma, but we have some uh, who we have to support in in various ways, and uh, this woman, no doubt, is going to be in the school at least throughout this year, the remainder of this year, and we can't do what we did on Friday, which was um, really troublesome, and and caused. I mean, the direct cause event was that it caused one of my my very vulnerable students to miss half a day of school. Um, and that can't be. We can't do that, and that can't be, and it's totally unacceptable. And so, how to integrate, the things that you said. And I'd like for you to reread that prayer from the 12-step program to me so I can hear it again. But the balance is not to say it in a nice way to this woman, but to make sure that it's clear to her that what happened on Friday can't happen again. It just cannot. Um, and um, I guess that is the conclusion of what I have to say to her, which I will do. Um, is
Yeah.
that whatever was going on for her that day that caused me to run into a gaggle of my colleagues, and then I ended up in the middle of something that had already started, where two of my colleagues, a clinical specialist and a behavior specialist, were talking about something that transpired before I even walked in the door. I decided, because it was a flex time, to go find. I had seen my student through the door of this woman's classroom in that classroom as I walked in the door. And so I went to get her out of there. And then I ended up being the lightning rod at the center of all of it. Uh, and we didn't do that student any favors, unfortunately. Um, I had to physically and explicitly apologize to the child, which I did on Friday. I I told her that the adults hadn't supported her that day, and that I for one apologized to her and made it possible for her not to go go to class for the rest of the day. Um, and I put her in a safe environment for her. Um,
So, the unanswered question, the powerful place to be, and sitting in it is good for you.
oh yeah, no, it's good for me. It's good for me.
It
But
is.
would you reread that prayer again? I'd like to
Sure.
think about it again.
It's called the sick man's prayer. You could just Google it. But the sick man's prayer. God, when a person offends me, help me to remember this is a sick person. Help me show the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Show me how I can be helpful to them. Save me from being angry. Thy will be done. Yes, we say many times each day. This is just from the book. Thy will be done. Thy will, not my will, be done.
Say it again.
Um, May thy will, not my will, be done.
May thy will, not my will, be done.
Right. And um, a lot of times I can psychologically like chip away at my Um, I guess the idea is that the other person is wrong and I'm right. Um, because I am an INFJ, um I like judge things and then I like justify the reasons for like why they're doing it, why I'm doing it. And like a way to chip away at it is to just to be willing to ask for willingness, the willingness to ask, it's like, let me get the wording right. It's like I have to be willing to ask for a little bit of willingness to look at it and to sit with it.
You know,
So that's how I like get myself
you know,
get myself there, but it's always a process and um the growing pains. And it's um growing pains.
you know. Well, it is growing pains, and obviously there are always conflicts among adults, one size or another. And I work in a extremely intense environment where we have 80 students, but for those 80 students, um, we have four psychologists, four social workers, and about six behavior specialists, among other things, plus special education. We have six people in our special education department. So that's that's a lot of professionals
Yeah, it's a lot of smart people.
trying to work with children who are very troubled in a variety of ways, and not to become um, not to become part of the problem. And that's the way to put it. We can't become part of the problem. Um,
Yes, we have to get out of the outcome business because that's up to
right.
God.
Yeah, very true.
Yes.
Uh, but anyway, all right, let's see what I'm gonna look at the um, YouTube chat here and see if I can see anything else. Uh, so Michael H asks, is there edition of the Red Book you would recommend that isn't $400? And the answer to that is yes, there is, and this is it. It's the Red Book Reader's Edition. This book contains all the words in the Red Book. It does not include the color prints of the images that Jung painted during the time of the Red Book. But all of those you can simply Google um, and find Jung's Red Book images or something like that. And you can find all of the images are available. Various people are trying to sell them since they're basically in the public domain at this point, or close to. Uh, there are a lot of people that are trying to sell prints of those images and so on. So they're available through Google very readily, and you can find if you like Audible, you can find my verbatim reading of the read book without commentary on this YouTube channel. And you can find a reading of the read book with commentary on this YouTube channel. And additionally, there's another one, which is a reading of the read book with commentary, which I did in the advanced reading group. And so all of those are there. And what the viewers of this session may not know is that um, I run an advanced reading group, and in that advanced reading group, we are currently reading Women Who Run with the Wolves. And I have recordings of all these sessions. I have permissions to publish them. And recently I uh, began to publish them. And so uh, the first four sessions that we did on Clarissa Pinkola Estes's book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, um, are already available online on this YouTube channel, and you can see more um, elsewhere. And I will publish all of them in due course. Plus, I have, I don't know, about 150 other sessions that are on other Jungian materials, like I'm just looking for something. Like Mysterium Conjunctionis, like Ion, and like Answer to Job. We've done advanced reading group sessions on all of those. And so you are invited to see those as soon as I can get them published. And so what I'm looking for right now is the link to the advanced reading group. So just a minute. So that you can, so the ones that I've published are just online on this YouTube channel. So the first four are there. Probably will be two or three more before I leave here today. And so what I'm sending you now is the link to participate with us if you wish to. Our advanced reading group takes place at 5 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, regardless of daylight saving. If it's 5 p.m. in the U.S. East, that is the time that we are holding these sessions, and somehow I messed that up. So let me try to do it again. And so you're all welcome to join us. And here it is. That is the advanced reading group, and the time for it is 5 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We'd be happy to have you. We have quite a few regulars. We have people from the United States, from Canada, from the UK, from Sweden, from Brazil, from Australia. And so it's quite a wide range of people that join us every week, and I hope you'll join us. Okay, let me see what I can see here. Yeah, let's see. She's referring to the master and his emissary, the divided brain in the making of the Western world. The matter with things, two volumes, our brains, our delusions, and the unmaking of the world. He wrote this one. I don't. Sheree, I'm sorry, what was that a reference to? Who is the author of those books? Um, I didn't go all the way back to find out, but if you would just remind us here. And
And also the cross, it represents man because man is
sure,
the um marriage of spirit and matter
right,
together, like
right,
unlike any other being that we know of.
right. And one of the fascinating things that came through on the good all last words last night was her story about uh, two chimpanzees, a mother and a son, and the mother had died of natural causes, and the son hadn't accepted her death. And finally, he went up into the tree, into the nest that they had together, and he com contemplated the nest for about a minute, she said. He came down to the bottom of the tree and lied down and died himself. And I just thought that was such a poignant story. Um, it was more detailed than that, but
A being must really be a fully a being to just that for
so
happened.
so that was definitely a spiritual thing to me. Okay. And this is part of the point that she raises, and she says that and she would know that chimpanzees share 98.3% of DNA with human beings. So they're the closest being on the planet to human beings without being human beings. Um, and Thank you, Sherry. Or yes, thank you, Sherry. So Ian McGilchrist was the author of those books. Um, and if someone has time, maybe you could start a YouTube channel on Ian McGilchrist, because obviously he has been an important philosopher for quite a while as well. And I don't claim to be an important philosopher. I only claim to be a conveyor of information about C.G. Jung, and to the extent that I know it, as well as I know it. So Sheree says he has two daughters and a son, now grandchildren. I think was divorced once. He is true scholar, and many would recognize those he conversed with. Yeah, he, I have seen him on a number of recordings by others on YouTube, and so he is well respected, and I urge everyone to look at it. So we are talking about um, Cherie's earlier remark. She was referring to uh, three books: The Master and His Emissary, The Divided Brain and the Making of the Western World, and The Matter with Things, in two volumes. Our Brains Are Delusions and the Unmaking of the World. I guess that's a fourth book. And he maybe he didn't write all those. She says he wrote the first one. Okay. Um, so anything else you want to talk about in the context of this, Michelle?
Let me go back to let me see what I've highlighted. Oh, okay, this last paragraph where he's talking about the conflict of nations. Only a change in the attitude of the individual can initiate a change in the psychology of the nation. That, like, I want to, like, of course, I'm sure that comes, that I'm sure that's correct, but like, I don't know, that's a big task. Um, but there's this anthropologist, Margaret Mead, and she is like, never underestimate the power of a small group of individuals in a united cause.
To change the world
Yeah.
because it's the only thing that ever has.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I actually bought a copy of that quote from Amazon, and it's a sticker, and I stuck it on the printer in my office.
Oh,
So
nice.
so I look at it every day. It's a sticker. You just buy it from Amazon and you can stick it wherever you want it. Never
Yeah.
never forget the importance of a small group uh, and its ability to change the world because it's the only thing that has ever changed the world. And we look at the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. We look at the 7 men who were in Landsberg prison with Adolf Hitler. Um, and there are plenty of other examples. The cabinet of the British government during the Second World War, led by Winston Churchill. Um, the U.S. took a major part in both World War I and World War II, but uh, I think that we have to acknowledge that the most significant thing that happened in World War II was Great Britain staying the course until the United States joined the war, because the World War II actually began on September 1st, 1939, when Adolf Hitler invaded Poland, and the British government recognized that this was going to get out of hand. And so we're very close to that uh, with the Ukraine war right now.
Very
And
close.
yeah, very close to that. And the war went on all of the remainder of 1939, 4 months, all of 1940, and 11 months of 1941 before the United States literally joined the war. We tried to stay out of it for over 2 years, and the British people, Winston Churchill, uh, and the people who fought the Battle of Britain saved Western civilization. Um, there's just no doubt about it. Um, and similarly, World War I began August 1st, 1914. The United States did not join that war until the spring of 1917, and the United States was only a part of that war for about a year and a half, from the spring of 1917 until the 11th month, the
Yeah.
11th
After the
day.
boat, right? The Lusitania or something like that.
Well, the Lusitania, that occurred in 1915, I believe, though. And it's still after that that the United States actually joined in World War One. And going back to something that we talked about earlier about heroics, um, I'll just tell you a story about um, how heroic my friend Tim Holmes, uh, his great aunt was. His great aunt was um, well, she was a lesbian, but she was a nurse, and she went to World War One as a nurse and served at least for most of the time that the United States was in World War One. At the end of World War One, she received a large payment, and her uh, partner also received a large payment, and the two of them went to Carmel by the Sea in California and bought a property and built a house at a time when the west coast of the United States was still essentially deserted, uh, and was no such thing as Carmel by the Sea. I think at that time it was just a lot of beach and sand in Monterey Bay. They built a home there, and Tim's family has that home to this day, thanks to their heroism in World War One. And by heroism, I don't mean they jumped on a grenade, but they faced the trauma of young men being blown apart in World War One, and they faced gas and men losing bloody limbs and a lot of them dying, and so that's that's heroism too. Absolutely, there's no doubt about that. And even though there are only 10 women on the wall from the Vietnam War, there are plenty of women who served in Vietnam and in nursing roles, very much like Tim's great aunt. Um, and I, I wouldn't say I had the luck, but I did experience those young women in 1971 when I got very sick from dysentery at one point, and I spent a week in the hospital in Da Nang as a result of that. And uh, they were amazing, those women. So I had a lot of experience with that personally. Uh, let's see. Oh, Cherie says that Ian McGilchrist wrote all four of those books, and it took him 20 years to do it. Um, and then she says Margaret Mead, 1901 to 1988. As an anthropologist, she was best known for her studies of the non-literate people of Oceania especially to various aspects of psychology and culture. Um, and Richard, thank you for what you wrote. I'm honored that you say that, but I'm not going to repeat it here. The YouTube um, the YouTube chat often disappears after our session. And so those of you who are live can read what Richard wrote, but I don't have so much hubris that I'm prepared to read it myself. And so thank you for that. But I'm not going to read it into this YouTube video for that reason. And so anything else, Michelle, before we wrap up?
Mm, Nope.
Okay, so let us go on. I wanted to mention one, since I'm seeing a picture of Tom Holtz on my screen. Tom Holtz was the actor who played Mozart in Amadeus. And I heard a fact about the Mozart production that is worth noting because it's a very special fact, and that is that um, the actor that thought he was going to get that part of Mozart was um, Mark Hamill. Okay, Mark Hamill did play Mozart in the stage production of Amadeus on Broadway. Yeah, something I didn't know. Mark Hamill. It so happens that Mark Hamill attended my high school in Japan. He was a Navy junior, and he graduated from my high school about a decade after I was there. But it's an interesting
Neat.
factoid. But anyway, Mark Hamill played Mozart in Amadeus on Broadway, and thought that he would get the part, but he didn't. And the reason was that the director was afraid that there would be too much aura of Star Wars associated with Amadeus if he picked Mark Hamill. So he selected Tom Holtz 6 months, and Tom Holtz did not play the piano when he was hired to play Mozart. And so in the 6 months before the production, Tom Holtz learned enough about the piano and fingerings and so on, so that he played all the actual parts, including there's the scene where he's lying on his back and he's playing the piano over his head like this backwards. And he learned how to play that part. And apparently, uh, experts say that every every hit of a key by Tom Holtz matches the music that's on the soundtrack. So he actually played that entire part. And that's just a remarkable talk about heroism. That's an amazing thing. Of course, they won the Academy Award that year and really deserved it. But anyway,
Wow.
yeah. And so anyway, so everybody should go watch this video called The Last Words of Jane Goodall. It's a beautiful documentary and it's on Netflix now. And I urge you to take a look at it. And I'm very hopeful that the producer of that um, will make it into a series where he talks to other people, because what Jane Goodall says after the interviewer leaves the room and she's alone, she's only talking to the camera. So this really was her last words. her intentional last words is really moving. And it's really worth seeing this whole documentary. It's a 1 hour documentary, um, but he interviewed her about her life and some of the things that she talked about. Okay, so next week, believe it or not, the synchronicity here is really scary, but I'm going to tell you what the title of the next essay is. The next essay is uh, Trickster, His Apocalyptic Brother, and a World's Unmaking, an archetypal reading of Donald Trump by Randy Fertile. And so, just for a tease for next week, I'll read that title one more time. I'll read that title one more time. Trickster, His Apocalyptic Brother, and a World's Unmaking, an archetypal reading of Donald Trump. And there are two quotes that are at the beginning of this essay, which I'll read now as a tease also. One is, face it, folks, we are a divided nation, divided between those who think that they're head and those who know with their heart. Because that's where the truth comes from, ladies and gentlemen, the gut. And that was Stephen Colbert on coining, quote, truthiness. And then a quote from Jung, the great question of our day, how can consciousness, our most recent acquisition, which is bounded ahead, be linked up again with the oldest, the unconscious, which has lagged behind?
That reminds me of a story that I heard about Alfred Einstein and Freud. When the United Nations was getting formed after the League of Nations, they needed to redo it.
Mhm.
Um, Albert Einstein wrote to Freud and was like, join us in our group. You would be great at this. What is your wisdom? And then Freud basically wrote back like all this doomer stuff, like we're doomed, humanity can't change. Uh, no. So I find that interesting. I
Well,
find that very interesting that he just was like, humans can't change.
well, of course, he died in 1939. And so he could Freud could well have been um, feeling the pressures of this collective unconscious leading up to World War II, and and Jung himself was also very doom oriented. Okay, um, and Marie Louise von Franz actually refused to repeat uh, Jung's final prophecy, which uh, which he gave to her, and she took to her death. She did not want people to hear Jung's final prophecy, which apparently was quite doomsaying. Um, she hinted at it in one of the videos that's on YouTube, but she did not talk about what it actually said. And and so Jung himself was quite a doomsayer, and uh, still we are here, and still we've lived with the bomb now for 80 years, and we haven't blown ourselves to smithereens yet, although there's still hope.
There's still time.
Yeah, but but anyway,
Well, I don't want
Uh,
to live without the internet anyways, so
well, that's understandable. That would be hard for everybody today. But um,
but wow, yeah, what a crazy coincidence with the next week's topic.
yeah, crazy.
That is crazy.
Speaking of crazy, that's a real crazy. Anyway, peace, everyone. We'll see you next week. Thanks,
Bye.
Michelle, for coming along with me today. That was very helpful.
No problem.
Take
I
care.
hope to be